Good afternoon, everyone. We might get started now. My name's Bettina McMahon. I'm the Interim CEO of the Australian Digital Health Agency, and I'd like to thank you for joining us this afternoon for this industry briefing on the Digital Innovation Challenge. And we're really excited to have 764 people register, so we have quite a few people here on the webinar this afternoon. I'd like first of all to acknowledge that we're meeting on traditional lands and to acknowledge the traditional owners of those lands across the country, to recognise their continuing connection to land, waters and culture. We pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging, and I'd like to extend that acknowledgement to any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander people who are joining us in this meeting today. With that, I'll hand over to Anthony McGuinness, who's our Director Mentally Friendly, to run through the Zoom webinar etiquette and housekeeping. Thanks.
Thanks, Bettina. Yes, so I'll quickly just provide a bit of introduction and go through some of the housekeeping, which will also answer some of the questions that are starting to come in around recording and making this available. So you are in a Zoom webinar as opposed to a Zoom meeting, for those of you that are familiar with Zoom. What that means is that this is not a typical video call. It means that your video and audio isn't shared. We can't hear you and we can't see you. You can hopefully hear and see us. You can communicate to us via the chat feature or the Q&A feature, which will appear at the bottom of your screen. This will be recorded and made available, but I'll go through that in a moment. What that should look like is something similar to this on your screen. So the chat function will allow you to send messages to us as panelists or to panelists and all attendees if you do want to send a chat message that way. However, if you do have a formal question that you want to ask the panelists, and there will be a section of this webinar that is a formal Q&A session, then please use the Q&A button or the Q&A feature rather than the chat feature, because that's what we're going to be reviewing and that's what we'll seek to address in the questions. Just some introductions. You've already heard from Bettina, who's the Interim CEO at the Australian Digital Health Agency. You'll also be hearing from Stephen Issa, the Chief Digital Officer. Clara Lubers is an international advisor with the agency. Jakub Šarlović is a solution architect, and my name is Anthony McGuinness. So I'm from a company called Mentally Friendly, and we've partnered with the agency to design and launch the challenge, which includes sort of hosting today's webinar. So just a very quick disclaimer. The webinar will be recorded and made available via AusTender and on the Innovation Challenge website. All questions asked and answers provided will be made available via AusTender and the Innovation Challenge website. And also, if you do ask a question using the Q&A feature, there is a little tick box there, and you can either do that anonymously by ticking that box, or you can do it with your profile name. When we do answer questions either in this webinar or afterwards, because we won't be able to get through all of the questions and answers, you will be anonymous in those, but certainly any questions that you ask and any answers that are provided either during or after will be made available to everyone, both on the AusTender page and via the Innovation Challenge website. The agenda for today's webinar is we're initially just going to provide a bit of background and context about the challenge itself. We'll go through some process and timelines for how the Innovation Challenge will run. We'll go through some frequently asked questions that have already been asked and coming into the email inbox that is available. Then we'll take some live Q&As based on what's being asked during the panel. And finally, we'll just sort of recap and go through next steps. Great, so I'm now going to hand over to Stephen Issa to take us through some of the background and context.
Thanks, Anthony. My name's Stephen. I'm the Chief Digital Officer at the Australian Digital Health Agency. My job is to provide a little bit of background and context. Now we're starting with essentially what we've seen in the digital health ecosystem through this coronavirus or COVID-19 pandemic. We've seen health and wellness at the centre of attention. In Australia, we've largely been fortunate enough that the massive infections and mortality rates haven't hit us as hard as they have in other countries. That said, we do believe our health landscape has changed forever. We've seen digital health technologies at the forefront. We've seen how being more agile in a digital world improves our ability and our care provision, not only now, but hopefully in the future, and assist with our future preparedness. We think that this challenge is should be addressing things that some people are calling part of the shadow pandemic, but it's, in our eyes, how do we address healthcare services, whether they be in hospital, in the home, in allied health, for people who are more vulnerable, perhaps in our community, those who have minimal economic support, social supports, may not speak English very well, may have an underlying health condition or a disability. So as we looked at what we've got now, we can see digital at the forefront. We can see the role it can play, and hoping to leverage that into the future. So as an agency, we started to think about what we could do to address the challenge that is COVID. And one of these things is obviously the innovation challenge. We took a step back, essentially go slow to go fast, and realize that we're not in business as usual. And I don't think we'll ever be in business as usual again. The world has changed, and we're going to need to pivot to a new normal. It might seem a little bit biased that the Australian Digital Health Agency and the Chief Digital Officer think that agility and digital is the answer to this, but we stand by it. We've got a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to learn, to develop enduring assets, mindsets, cultures, to truly redevelop, redesign perhaps the future of digital healthcare in this country and beyond. And it's an opportunity for us to do it together. Next slide, please. To that end, we looked at our role as an agency in the National Digital Health Strategy. And that provides a couple of foundational pieces for us to leverage. Two of the priorities in that strategy include enablement of models of care that improve accessibility, quality and safety and efficiency of healthcare, and importantly, a thriving digital health industry delivering world-class innovation. We realise as an agency we can't do that alone. We realise the industry needs to come along, whether it be industry itself, academia, government. There's the notion that we're all in this together, and I think that speaks equally for innovation. Next slide. So as an agency, having that context in mind, having the context of digital and the digital health ecosystem, what digital can provide, that agility and flexibility, and noting that we don't believe we're going to go back into a business as usual and the world's changing, the agency established a task force to support the national effort against COVID-19, and predominantly to accelerate digital health adoption and also championing innovation across the health sector. Over the next few weeks, you'll see a couple of other exciting developments that the agency has been working on, predominantly a COVID-19 information hub. We're working frantically on e-prescribing and getting that to the market. But for this case and for this webinar, we're looking only at the innovation challenge, but please stay tuned for things that are coming in future. Next slide. So the innovation challenge is our opportunity, or the industry's opportunity, to really come up with unique concepts, ideas, working solutions that address both the root cause and symptomatic issues affecting healthcare access in Australia today. As a country, we've got a really proud history of innovation, whether it be the cochlear or the Hills hoist or Wi-Fi. So we're looking to extend that, to leverage, to come up with the next best, brightest thing. The government, the agencies, here to facilitate working with industry to turn around these solutions in a short time frame, we understand, but it's the nature of the environment that we're in. Next slide. So to do that, we're looking to launch 3 themes, and Clara will touch on those a little bit later on, but essentially we're challenging innovators from across the country, as I said, to come up with those next great things. If successful, we'll work with you to address kind of perhaps barriers to overcoming scale, perhaps barriers in legislation and policy. But what we're doing is encouraging everybody, please, to share the innovation challenge, to respond not only to this innovation challenge, but the challenge that is COVID. to be clear, this is not about tracking, this is not about tracing, this is not about flattening the curve. This innovation challenge, we hope, is about those things that sit on the periphery of the virus itself. It's not about the virus. It could be aged care, it could be mental health, it could be supply chain. It's those things that COVID possibly has affected, but not the virus itself. It's about, as I said, what people are calling the shadow pandemic. And it's also about making sure that as a country and as a digital health ecosystem, we are as prepared as we can be for future national emergencies. I'll hand over now to Clara, who's going to talk to the 3 challenge topics that we're hoping everybody responds to.
Thanks, Stephen. So as mentioned, there are 3 key themes: digital clinical care, digital social care, and digital health population management and future preparedness. So as Stephen mentioned, each of these themes are particularly focused on supporting the community with digital health solutions. One of our key focuses for all 3 themes is to address COVID-19 as it evolves into recovery management and shaping Australia's digital healthcare systems for the better beyond national health emergencies. We are particularly interested in digital health solutions that can be adapted for other national health emergencies, for example, bushfires or floods, or that can address capability gaps in our healthcare system more broadly, where digital health solutions can be adapted to be fit for purpose. So the first theme, digital clinical care: how do we support Australians to confidently access healthcare and community health support services without compromising their health or that of others? This includes during a national emergency and/or the recovery period following. So we've identified a couple of areas that digital health solutions could focus on. When developing this theme, front of mind was supporting at-risk individuals and communities and elderly Australians to get much needed clinical care services in their home or within healthcare settings. We sought advice from clinicians who helped to identify that some at-risk community members, as well as those who get regular medications, and some of our elderly population weren't seeking the regular clinical care they require due to fear of contracting COVID-19 in their GPs or hospitals. Next slide, please. Thanks. Digital social care. So how do we support easy access to digital health solutions for community members directly or indirectly impacted by COVID-19, a national emergency or other circumstance? Again, a key focus when developing this theme was at-risk community members and how we can support those who require, for example, allied health services, social workers, or disability support in their homes. Front of mind for this was also providing coordinated mental health and wellbeing plans through digital technologies. Next slide, please. And finally, digital health population management and future preparedness. How do we improve population health outcomes through digital health solutions to help inform future emergency or other preparedness, health reform, and recovery management? So this theme is really focused on preparing for the future, accelerating digital health nationally, and developing new agile ways of working. We're particularly interested in innovative digital health solutions, leveraging the new normal, identifying and bridging key capability gaps in the healthcare ecosystem to achieve broader health system strengthening. This could include, for example, digital health solutions to target country-level coordination, planning and monitoring of national health emergencies, risk communication and community engagement, and much more. Next slide, please. So we've just started a poll and we'd like you to take a moment to see what challenge theme you're thinking of applying for. This poll will be open for the next 10 minutes or so, and Anthony will let us know when it's about to close. So next slide, please. Thanks. Challenge partners. We'd like to thank all of our partners for joining us in this exciting initiative. Anthony, next slide. Thanks. Thank you. We're very grateful for their expertise and support. Thanks. As you can see, our partners have varying expertise. Sorry about this. As you can see, our partners have varying expertise and are from a range of government, industry, academic and not-for-profit areas. They are providing the agency with their expertise to help us determine successful candidates, and some will also continue to support this work once successful applicants are determined. This could be through a range of ways, for example, assisting in dealing with key commercialisation barriers to scaling digital health solutions through providing connections, industry expertise, and or government policy, for example. And apologies, I think we've lost a slide there. So sorry about that. Anthony, I'll hand it over to you now.
Yeah, sorry about that. I'm not sure why that slide isn't rendering. On the challenge website, there is a full list of all of those partners who have kindly agreed to be part of that challenge. So apology if any of our partners are on the call here and unable to see the logos there. But I'll try again at the end of the webinar to see if I can bring them up, because we're really appreciative of their support. Also, before I go into sort of process and timelines, just a quick note on the Q&A function. It's great to see people in there and asking questions. There are some questions that we are also answering via text, so please keep your eye on that. Also, if you have a similar question, rather than asking it again, we really encourage you to use the like feature. That will effectively upvote it and sort of make its way to the top of the list, so we know what are the most pressing questions in there. So please keep your eyes peeled on the Q&A function as well. So I'm just going to now go through a bit more information on the process and the timeline for the challenge itself. At a high level, the challenge launched on the 30th of April. Today, of course, we're hosting the industry briefing, and on the 10th of May, submissions are due. Once we've received all of those submissions, then applications will be assessed and a shortlist developed. As part of that shortlisting, we'll be asking participants to make a presentation to the evaluation panels and also answer any questions that the panel might have, at which point we'll notify successful applicants. Successful applicants will then be asked to participate in a co-design workshop with the agency and also prepare a detailed design and implementation plan. And I'll go into a bit more detail about these points soon. Once that occurs, then supplemental industry offers will be made to successful applicants. And again, I'll go into what that means in a bit more detail, but effectively it's like a second stage where the agency will continue to work with organisations to help scale these solutions and realise their desired impact. So just a bit more information about a few of these key process points. The first is around conditions for participation. And in your application, you will be required to confirm that you do meet these requirements. The first is that participants must be able to demonstrate evidence that their company is financially viable, and the agency may request financial documents as evidence of that in the future. Participants must have a working prototype or concept at the time of application, and as part of your presentation, you will be asked to showcase that working prototype or concept. So naturally there'll be a bit of variance in sort of where solutions are at in terms of prototype versus concept, but you know, it does need to be a working prototype or concept when you're submitting the application. Participants must have internal resources, and those resources need to have the experience that's necessary to actually develop this solution and take it to scale. And participants' solution must fit within one or more of the challenge topics. And finally, participants cannot be a state or territory health department. In terms of making an application, as I mentioned earlier, these applications are due on the 10th of May, and they need to be submitted by 11:30 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time. Submissions occurs on the AusTender website. The URL is there. You can also navigate to that site from the Innovation Challenge website. Within the AusTender page, there are a number of attachments. One is the respondent deed of undertaking, which is Schedule 2. You will be required to complete that as part of your application. And there's also the respondent submission information document. That's where you actually make your submission and fill out the required form. Also on there is a contract template, which you can review prior to submission. In assessing applications, there is an evaluation criteria, and these are the 4 criteria with associated weightings. Both the documents on AusTender and the industry and the Innovation Challenge website do go into a bit more detail about these criteria. The first is solution feasibility. So what we're really looking for here is understanding how feasible it is to take this solution and to make it real. So that will consider factors such as technology, product market fit, whether you've got the partnerships required to make it happen. So, you know, can we actually turn this idea into a reality? The second, worth 40%, is impact. And what we're really looking for there is confidence that your solution will deliver on its promise in relation to the challenge themes. And the more evidence that you can provide to that, the better, whether that's sort of specific measures that you are targeting as part of your desired impact, and really how it meets the challenge topics that you're applying against. We'd like to hear about the credibility of your company and the level of digital maturity, again, to be confident that the organization has the ability to take this solution and make it real. And finally, we'd like you to identify what barriers you're facing to scale, being really open, honest, and transparent about those barriers. And importantly, what support you need from the agency to actually address those barriers, because that's how we're going to achieve the desired impact, is by working collaboratively, understanding what those barriers are, and trying to unblock those. If you are shortlisted following this assessment, as I mentioned earlier, you will be invited to then showcase your solution to the agency, and you may be asked some questions from the evaluation team as part of that session. And those presentations will be conducted via video conference, and further details will be made to shortlisted applicants closer to the date. If you are successful, then you'll be invited to enter into a contract with the agency, and that contract will require you to do these 3 things. The first is to participate in a co-design workshop. That is an opportunity for the agency and the organization to sit down, understand the solution in more detail, but collaboratively start sharing ideas on how that solution will work, how we could look at enhancements, and really how we can collaborate to define a design which best meets the challenge themes and fits in with that sort of context that Steve took us through earlier. Once that's occurred, there's 2 outputs that need to be developed. The first is a detailed design, and that's really understanding how the solution will address challenge themes and overcome barriers to scale and adoption. So really getting a bit more detail about the solution itself based on the outcomes of the co-design workshop, and also an implementation plan. And that specifies sort of how the solution will be rolled out and how we'll overcome some of those barriers to scale that we've identified, and what specific support you require from the agency and its partners to have its desired impact. So part of that contract will be a payment of up to $50,000 that will be paid based on completing those milestones that I've just outlined. There is also further support available post this first stage. Just to be clear, that first stage are the 3 requirements I said earlier, and that's what this $50,000 payment is tied to. It's up to that amount. You'll be asked in your application to specify how much funding you are seeking. But then there will be a second stage where the agency will reserve the right to extend an offer to continue to work with those organizations to develop the solution out, unblock barriers to scale, and effectively execute on the implementation plan that's been developed collaboratively. What that will look like is a formal supplementary industry offer. As I mentioned, the decision to proceed with a supplemental industry offer is at this agency's sole discretion, but that is the intent of the agency, is to proceed and to help these solutions to scale. This phased approach has been designed because this allows for flexibility and is what sort of spurs innovation. It allows the agency and the organization to work collaboratively, but remain quite open-minded around how products can be enhanced and how sort of emergent insights are happening, and ultimately working towards the challenge themes. So what's on offer in terms of the second stage? it really depends on the solution and the organization and what specific support they're looking for. But the sorts of things that can be offered is helping to navigate government policy and regulation, looking at possible how we can provide access to data and also possible system integrations. It might be about facilitating partnerships across the health and digital ecosystem. And you know, there's a long list of partners that are already signed up to be involved in this challenge. So there is a great opportunity here for the agency to facilitate some of those partnerships. And there is further funding support available to actually develop the solution and execute on the implementation plans. But it's not just about the financial support, it's about the other things that the agency can support to make these solutions work. Great. So that's a bit more detail about the process. I'm now going to close the poll. So I'll just give you another sort of 10 seconds if you haven't had a chance to complete that poll. I'm just going to give you a couple more seconds. Oh, a few last minute coming in. Thank you. Great. Thank you for that. Great. So I'm now going to hand over to Jakob, who's going to run through some of the questions that we've been getting since launch on Friday.
Great. Thanks, Anthony. So I think there've been a lot of questions coming through on the live session. So thank you very much for that. We'll be addressing those some of those in a little while. One of the frequently asked questions is around, can foreign companies apply? The answer is yes. The challenge is open to respondents or respondent groups that are foreign companies, provided that they can supply details of registration under Part 5B of the Corporations Act for 2001. This effectively requires that businesses are registered with the Australian Securities and Investment Commission, and respondents would need to show evidence that they are registered with ASIC, such as a certificate of registration. So the answer is yes on that one. Next slide, please. So here's another good one that's come been repeated on the in-session question and answer. Is, I'm an individual with a great idea in the healthcare sector, but I do not represent an organisation or business. Will I be able to submit an application as an individual? Unfortunately not. Whilst the intent of the Innovation Challenge is to solicit innovation from the broad industry, including individuals, government procurement constraints dictate that for the agency to be able to pay for the services, it requires respondents to be Australian registered businesses. So our hands are a bit tied on that one. Next slide, please. So my solution is in a concept phase. Am I eligible to apply? I think we've been, Anthony has mentioned around that. We're really looking, so the answer is yes. The challenge is open to respondents that not only have an existing product that they would like to enhance, but also respondents that have a concept that they would like to develop into a minimum viable product or prototype for scaling out, providing that it addresses the challenge theme or themes and meets the conditions of participation and the eligibility criteria. So answer is yes on that one. Next slide, please. I have a solution that will address more than one theme. Do I submit a separate expression of interest response? Will I be eligible for multiple payments? So on that one is, if you are in a situation, please submit one EOI response. This will minimize your overhead and effectively allow us to look at how your proposed solution will address multiple challenge themes. If you are in this situation, please rank which order you see it as addressing best. So if you've got a specific theme that your solution addresses more closely, we would encourage you to indicate that in your response. The solution will only qualify for one payment as the payments are associated with the solution. Next slide, please. So this one is also very similar to the previous question. I have two solutions that will address separate challenge themes. Do I submit separate EOI responses? Will I be eligible for multiple payments? So once again, please submit one EOI response detailing in the submission how the proposed solutions address the specific challenge themes. The respondents and developers may seek to undertake a challenge for each proposed solution and qualify for multiple payments. Note that two versions of what is substantially the same solution would not be considered distinct and therefore would not be eligible for the offer. The agency will, as required, assess Sorry, that was broken up there.
Yep, we've got you back.
Oh, sorry, low bandwidth connection. So I'll just repeat that. So the agency will, as required, assess whether two potential solutions are in fact distinct based on factors such as software packages have different brands, release cycles, and code sets. And the agency's determination regarding the two potential solutions shall be considered distinct for the purposes of this offer and will be final. So I think that sort of covers most of the questions and variants of the questions that have been coming in the Q&A. So we'll go and try and take some off the wire. A few selected questions that have come through our chat function. I'll just bring them up on my screen. So I do believe one of the questions was around, can universities apply? So yes, universities can apply, providing that they are registered with ASIC and have an ABN. So that's a yes on that one. Grant, what is the grant amount? So just a point of clarification, the agency is not providing grants. These are contracts for goods or services, in this case certavices, and it's up to the $50,000 mark. We, as Anthony was mentioning, that depends on in your submission. We encourage respondents to provide details around what payments they need to be able to fulfill the contract for the initial phase. How many contracts will we be looking at awarding? It's up to 10 contracts. So we're looking at up to 10 contracts that we're looking to award. Another question that's come through: does my solution need to integrate or support or enhance my health record? No, the solution does not need to integrate with the My Health Record, and we're looking for broad innovation. So that's not one of the conditions for participation. Having said that, if in your submission you feel that it will help your chance to say that your product will integrate with the My Health Record, we will evaluate that response based on the evaluation criteria provided. Just looking at through the other ones. So once again, startups eligible. Once again, bringing it back to if you do have an Australian business number and you have an ABM and you are registered, you are effectively in a position to submit that a submission. The other through that. I think the ones around the IP, what are the IP arrangements? So The company will effectively retain the IP for the proposed solution, and ownership of the IP is not affected by including it in its submission. For successful applicants, as Anthony outlined, that enter into the contract with the agency, we will be required to provide a detailed technical design and implementation plan deliverable that will be used then to make an informed decision on potential future industry offers. So the IP is very much retained by the respondents. What are the payment milestones? The payment milestones we have is it's outlined in the draft contract that we have submitted, and it effectively is 30% of the submitted payment would be paid at contract execution. Then there's another 30% upon submission of the first draft of the detailed design and implementation plan. And then the remaining 40% would be provided on receipt of an agency approved detailed design and implementation plan. Can large organizations? In terms of format, what is the format of the submission? So the format of the submission is within the request for expression of interest. There is a Schedule 3, which we require the respondents to fill out, and we'll be using that as a mechanism to evaluate and shortlist through the procurement process. Is any solution too big or too small? No. No solution is too big or too small, and we welcome once again the intent of the innovation challenge is to be very, very broad. We're really seeking to solicit innovation right across the board, and which is why we've made this very much an open tender, and we are looking for anything that will effectively provide innovation in addressing the challenge themes outlined. Do we have time for any more questions? So does a submission require clinical partner or vendor only? I don't believe, we don't really need a clinical partner. It's if you want to submit your submission as a vendor, that's fine. And once
seems like Jacob's dropped.
Sorry, go on, Steve. Sorry, just waiting on Stephen.
Looks like he's dropped out.
Yes, we dropped out. So once again, how finished do these prototypes need to be? Is a medium fidelity prototype sufficient, i.e. designed and clickable but not coded? I think once again, you know, we are looking at not only products that are out there. We are looking at concepts and we're looking at any elements that will effectively provide innovative solutions to meet the challenge theme. So, and what we're really wanting to do by intending that the respondents provide barriers to scale is we really want to understand what are some of those barriers that prevent products from scaling. So we are seeking respondents to detail that and work together with the agency to be able to overcome those barriers to scale and adoption. So what are some of the barriers to adoption? I mean, these could be economic, where funding is required. These could be access to data to be able to scale the product out. So I think the barriers to adoption are going to be very specific to the solution that is being proposed and the challenge theme that it is being addressed. So we're really looking at respondents to have a good think and understanding around what are some of the resources that are required to be able to scale this solution out for it to be to make the impact that they foresee. So and we really want to see that specifically in the implementation plan. So at the end of this particular innovation challenge for the initial phase, the intent of the industry is to have a very clear visibility on industry capability in terms of meeting these challenge themes, and then make a very informed decision around how best to progress and proceed. So it's very much designed by that aspect. So I might, just conscious of time, there's obviously a lot more questions coming through, and what we'll do is our intent is obviously to take these and package them up into our FAQ section, which will be made available both on the innovation website and through AusTender. So I'd like to thank you for all your questions and your time. I'll now pass over to Anthony.
Thanks, Jakob. So I'm going to hand over to Steve, if you're there, just to wrap up and go through next steps.
Thanks, Anthony. Just if you get to the next slide. So there are many questions in the questions and answers. What we will do is answer those questions and put them both on the AusTender and also the frequently asked section on the Innovation Challenge website. We'll work through those over the next couple of days. You know, I could see the main one is IP, and there's a question around the contract template doesn't match the answers. We'll absolutely address that and have the update both on the AusTender website and on our own. There's questions also around joint submissions. Are they okay? Again, whilst we're taking most of these on notice, and we'll provide a detailed response to everybody on the call and everybody on the website. The view is yes, joint submissions are okay. I'm just going through the top ranked questions that have been voted up. International vendors, again, I think Jacob answered that question. A really good question about 5 days sufficient to produce a working model. Again, we're not looking for just working models or products. Concepts are fine. Something that we could take or work with the agency to create an MVP. What the agency is looking to do is facilitate innovation in the healthcare sector, facilitate digital innovation and digital adoption acceleration. This is not about having a complete product. This is not about only the big end of town being able to play in digital innovation in this country. This is about the agency fostering and facilitating innovation for everybody to make that next step change for digital health. If you have any other questions, please email the agency at innovationchallenge@digitalhealth.gov.au. Those questions will also be published on AusTender on our website. As I said, we've got a very proud history as a country to create digital innovations like Wi-Fi and Cochlear. Let's hopefully find the next best thing, and you could kind of sit at that same esteem. Please share this challenge widely. Please submit your applications by 10:30 on Sunday. We're really excited to see what the industry provides. We're really excited to be working with the best and brightest of government, academia and industry in the adjudication panels. I can't tell you how excited I am. I know kind of my peers are as excited. This is a once in a lifetime opportunity. Whilst we don't want to seem opportunist, we've really got to take this and run with it to really change what digital health can be and what digital health is, not only for this country, but possibly the world. So thank you everybody for joining. I'll leave it there. Bettina, if you want to make any closing remarks, you're more than welcome. But thank you, everybody. We've had upwards of 690 people on the call at one point. Really encouraging the participation, really encouraging the amount of tender downloads we've seen from the AusTender website. Thank you. Please share and please apply.
Thanks again for your participation, your interest in the challenge. And I'm just going to put Anthony on notice. We put out a poll earlier. Have we got the results to the Zoom
Of
poll?
course, sorry. Let's get it out there. Can we see that? Yeah. Can people see that? I'm seeing a few nods. So yeah, digital clinical care was top voted, followed by digital health population management and future preparedness, and then digital social care. And quite a few people just interested observers. So thank you for joining us.
Thanks, everyone, and looking forward to seeing your fantastic ideas at the end of the week. And watch the website for the answers to the rest of those questions that you've put up. Thanks very much, everyone.
Thanks.